Welcome to the No BS Spiritual Book Club's live streaming interview series, where leading new thought teachers, speakers, and authors share the intimate stories behind the 10 best spiritual books that inspired them the most on their spiritual journey. From well-known classics to hidden gems you might never have heard of, the No BS Spiritual Book Club saves you time and money by sharing reliable recommendations from those who've walked the path before you. The No BS Spiritual Book Club, the only No BS guide to the best spiritual books to inspire your own journey of self-discovery. Here's your host, founder of the No BS Spiritual Book Club, Sandie Sedgbeer.
Hello and welcome. And with me today to share the stories behind the 10 best spiritual books that had the biggest impact on her life journey is heart-based energy intuitive, Reiki Master, life coach, and author Becki Koon, whose best-selling book, 20 Days Changed Everything, a love story moving through conscious death to afterlife connection, chronicles her husband Jack's 20-day conscious death process and Becki's afterlife communication with him. Becki Koon, welcome.
Thank you, Sandie. I'm excited to be here.
Good to have you with us.
Yeah.
So let's start by asking you about the process of having to distill your 10 best list down to just 10.
Oh my. So when I decided to go ahead and say, yes, I would love to do this, the process of thinking about 10 books I didn't really think too much about it until I got started. I've read hundreds of books, Sandie. I'm an avid reader. I love books. So then I was like, oh, wow, 10, only 10. Oh, wow. How do I distill it down to those books that really impacted me? But it was a beautiful journey. As challenging as that was, it was a beautiful journey of going back in time. And it was like a time capsule for me of what really impacted aspects of my life and what parts of the journey along the way. So it was wonderful.
Makes you wonder, doesn't it? Where would you be now if you hadn't read those 10 books?
Oh gosh. Exactly, because they came at such pivotal points in my life.
Yeah. And that's what usually happens, isn't it? You know, you're there and you're ready to receive whatever's coming, and that's why it becomes one of the 10 best. Yeah. So you know, your relationship with books, I know you've had as many of us have, a very long relationship with books and a very rewarding one. But you also love to write. And your favorite class in school was creative writing.
Yes, which, you know, I think back now, and it's the aspects of being a writer was in me. I didn't think too much about it then, but I still have the stories I wrote in high school, Sandie.
You've kept them?
I've kept them, yes.
What do you think of them?
Oh my gosh, it's really funny to go back and watch. You know, I was doing imaginative stories and creative stories, but it's fun to go back and see where I was in high school, what my thought process was, because truthfully, I could rewrite those stories today, polish them up a little bit, obviously, but it's fun to have those. It's fun to have that, recognizing that it's always been a part of me.
Yeah. So when you were reading these books on your journey, some of them, I imagine, were after you'd written some of your own books?
You know, a lot of them actually were before and then in the process of. So, you know, I've written stories. I wrote a book several years ago about my son and our journey with what I was experiencing with him, which we'll talk about a little bit more. But a lot of these books, it was in tandem. I really, Sandie, when I look back and I think about it, I think some of them were before I really started writing and some of them were in tandem.
Did any of them influence your actual writing itself? The way you write?
Yes. I think the one that influenced the most was If It Moves the Human Heart, which is a book that, you know, we'll talk about. It was a book that I knew, for me personally, Sandie, my writing was not about the technical aspect of it or, it was, I knew that if I could capture someone's heart, which is me, as a heart-based intuitive, it's always been about heart for me. It's always been about connecting with another. And so when I read that book, it was a validation for me in going forward and knowing that how I wrote was actually very valid.
Yeah. It's interesting, isn't it? It's words on paper. That's all it is. But it's the way those words are put together, and it's the energy behind them that has the impact, that conveys the message. Yeah.
Yes. And I recognize,
Carry on.
being an empath. So I now identify myself or recognize that I think my whole life I've been very empathic, very sensitive, and very aware of energy and the energy of things. And so, yes, it is very much about the energy of the words.
Yeah. Well, your first book, your first choice, is a book that has enormous energy, and it turns up again and again in the book club, in people's 10 best lists, and with very good reason. It is Man's Search for Meaning, an introduction to logotherapy by Viktor Frankl. So do you remember when you read this book?
Yes. I was in the middle of dealing with some real challenges in my life, Sandie. So my son came into this world in 81, very much alive and vibrant and full of life. And then school started, kindergarten, first grade, and very quickly it became very challenging for him. And we recognized that while he was brilliant, he was really challenged by the system of things, by the way he saw things. School was very traumatic for him from the get-go. And so when he was 6 years old, I remember him telling me that he didn't want to be on the planet anymore. Like, he really didn't want to be here. And that was heartbreaking for me because, I was a very engaged mother. And so he went down a road of medications and doctors and counselors. And, I went down this path with him, Sandie. And by the time he was 10, he was in Children's Primary Hospital month in Salt Lake City at the psychiatric ward. And they basically told me they didn't think he would function in society, that he was very challenged. And that was heartbreaking. And I was dealing with a whole bunch of things, trying to find solutions. And I think I felt pretty hopeless. I was feeling pretty challenged. And this book just came into my life at the right time. So I immediately read it from front to back, didn't stop. And it was for me to read Victor's experience in the Nazi death camps and how he was able to step into an aspect of himself despite the circumstances, despite what it was he was seeing around him and dealing with, that he was able to connect to that source within him. It gave me strength. It totally gave me strength. And, I was able to take a deep breath and say, okay, my circumstances are not that. My circumstances are definitely something challenging, but something that I can learn to walk through. And so I really sought the spiritual things to support me. There were lots of people in my life that were helping. There were a lot of spiritual teachers I started seeking out. There was just a lot of beautiful things that started to take place through the challenge, through the heartbreak of what my son was going through. So that book really was key for me to find my kind of my strength as a mother. To stand in the face of what I was standing in the face of.
Yeah, I mean, it's so interesting that incredible experience that he went through, devastating experience, has inspired so many people.
So many people. I couldn't help but be there with him. I was there with him, and recognizing that I had my own journey to have to find that within me to stand in. Right, I was doing that for myself and my son and my family, and moving through situations that could have been looked at as fairly hopeless, and yet this book was just such a key in helping me find it within me, right? To find that that strength, that light, that source, right? That we all have access to.
Yeah. The second book, Stuart Wilde, Infinite Self, 33 Steps to Reclaiming Your Inner Power. And you said this one used to make you laugh.
I love Stuart Wilde.
Very irreverent.
Very irreverent.
Yes.
Very irreverent. But for me to read his work, he had a way of distilling it down to just the basic concept, the basic idea, the basic part of our human nature. And I think what I like, I kind of like the rebel. I tend to kind of gravitate towards those who are a little bit rebellious, right? I think I really appreciated that part of him. And so I got really keyed into Stuart Wilde right away. The 33 Steps was just a simple guidebook as I was continuing my spiritual journey and my growth. It was a beautiful little guide to...
What are these 33 steps?
Well, I believe they're based on Taoist philosophies of the 33 steps of energy that we have access to on the planet, and moving through what those steps might be, the process of moving through. And so it's almost like a little guidebook, a little playbook of how to begin to walk through a spiritual awakening or a spiritual journey. And there's simple enough steps that I felt like, okay, this is a great book to, if you're just beginning, it was a great book for me to really dive into. And they were doable. The steps were doable for me. And I don't know. And I just enjoyed him. I enjoyed his writing style. I started looking at his other books. He's got a lot of other books, and started listening to him. And I think one of the things that was really key for me too, as well, Sandie, and we'll talk about my partnership with Jack, but we did our spiritual journey a lot together. And Stuart Wilde was one of those that we just had a blast talking about and dissecting his information and reading his books together. So for me, it was part of my journey in relationship with another man. Stuart Wilde became a big piece of that with us.
Yeah.
So,
yeah. Very aptly named man.
Very aptly named, right?
Yeah. Okay, so the next book on your list, obviously you've talked about your son, and anyone who knows the story will not be surprised by this book. It is The Indigo Children. The New Kids Have Arrived by Lee Carroll and Jan Tober, which was also an influential book in my life. So tell us when you came across The Indigo Children.
Gosh, I think I started reading Cryon, Lee Carroll's work, in the 90s when that first started coming out. And it was probably, I don't know, mid-90s, late 90s. It was right after that book came out. I don't remember what year it came out, Sandie, exactly. But right after that book came out, I got it. Because that was right in the middle of all of the stuff I was dealing with my son. And so when The Indigo Children came out and I read that book, it was like reading a documentary about my life.
Your life, yeah.
I was blown away by the similarities and the information and the intuitive awarenesses that I had about my son and the experience we were going through. But it was validated in that book big time. And it really felt like my story. I felt like I had been validated, Sandie, in what I was experiencing and what my son was experiencing in his life. And, my son was early. I mean, he was in the early round of what they considered indigo, I think, but he definitely challenged things, Sandie. He was highly intelligent, very intuitive, very psychically aware, but challenged the school, challenged the medical system, challenged the counselors. I mean, it was this awareness that he saw the world very differently and experienced the world very differently.
Yeah, and really, that was their job.
Yes.
Someone had to come along and challenge the status quo.
Shaking up the system, right?
Absolutely. Otherwise, we get stuck in it, don't we? And so it continues. And look where we are now. I mean, we could do with a bit more challenge, I think, but maybe not so harsh.
Right.
Yeah.
So it was a beautiful book for me to find at that time, and recognize I was not alone, that it was, something that was, other people were experiencing. It was something very much on time, on purpose, all of that. Yeah.
Yeah. I think it was a book that saved the sanity for a whole generation of mothers.
I think so.
Yes. Really. Yeah.
So, yeah. I think we recognizing that we weren't alone and that what we were dealing with, oh, wow, okay. Maybe it's not just how we're not parenting or that we're doing something wrong, right? How do we honor who they are, who they came to be?
Well, I've always seen it as an evolutionary leap. I mean, we're evolving all the time, and you think about how technology has evolved, and when we are forced to learn new things all the time, and stay on our toes, we lay down a lot of neural pathways, new ones, and I think, how can we not expect our children to be different?
Right, right.
Because they are the result of that.
Yes. Yeah. Well, and I think the other thing that I recognize too, Sandie, is that beginning to understand that I was very empathic in my life. I didn't have the words. I didn't understand what that meant. I just know that I experienced a lot of energy in my life and a lot of sensitivity. And so I realized, I have a child who is like the next version, an expanded version of that. Like the apple doesn't fall far from the tree at times, right? So, it was a beautiful awareness for me.
Yeah. And now we hear all the time, I mean, the phrase energetically sensitive people is mainstream. People are talking about it all the time, as if this is a new discovery.
Right. But it's so beautiful that it's becoming mainstream. Because, so many people, we haven't had the words for it before, perhaps. But more and more people are recognizing, oh, that's why. I understand myself a little more now. Yeah.
So book number 4 is another very, very popular book in the book club, The Power of Now, A Guide to Spiritual Enlightenment by Eckhart Tolle. A very important book in your life too.
Absolutely. And again, that was another book that Jack and I we really dove in and distilled and got into a lot of Eckhart's work. But that book in particular was helped me really step into my work as a Reiki Master, as a healer, as the energy, the work that I do now, Sandie, about being in the now, being in this present moment, really recognizing what it is about us. How do we navigate this world that we live in while we do it in this moment, in this breath, in this. And so, and he's great to watch. I have a video of him when he was at Findhorn, and I love watching him. He's just present. He's just there in the stillness of what he's sharing. And so, it really helped kind of ground me, Sandie, because I can be a high energy person. I can get going and I can have a lot of energy. I am sensitive to energy, so I'm running energy a lot. So his work and watching him and reading his work helped kind of just ground me into my body, into the moment, right? So,
yeah. So book number 5, another one by Cryon, Lee Carroll, The Journey Home, A Cryon Parable, the story of Michael Thomas and the 7 angels. I remember reading this one many years ago.
I loved that story. I loved that parable. It's a fun read. It's a fun read about a gentleman who he's at this crossroads, life and death. He's got it, he's not sure he wants to stay, right? He's trying to decide where he wants to go, and he just wants to go home. He's at a place in his life where he wants to go home. And so, something happens and he ends up having to go on this journey, this adventure where he meets these 7 angels, and each of these angels have something for him. They have a challenge. They have information that he needs to learn about and distill as he goes on this journey. And he's also has to face some darkness. He has to face some challenges. And I loved the story of Michael Thomas and what he went through, because again, it was as I was going through my own self-discovery and my own journey and my spiritual growth. So it helped me. It was one of those books that you're there with him, and yet you're thinking about your own journey, your own life.
Did you read many of the Cryon books?
I read most of them. In fact, I've read all of them.
I
say most of them. I've read all of them. I have his collection. Yeah.
But you picked this one.
I did pick this one because you know what? It was fun. And I think
quite different from the others.
It's quite different from the others. And I think the part of me that wanted to say, if I had a book about a spiritual journey that impacted me, it was lighthearted, it was fun, and there's a surprise discovery at the end that I just was like, oh, wow. Wow. Okay, so you're going to have to read the book to see what that discovery was. So I think the part of me that just really wanted to enjoy it and have fun with the journey, that's why that book impacted me so much. Yeah.
So book number 6 is Hot Chocolate for the Mystical Soul, 101 True Stories of Angels, Miracles and Healings by Ariel Ford. And you actually had a story in that book.
I did. And it was fascinating because when my son started healing, like I got out of the medical model system and started doing alternative healing with him. I started exploring everything alternative for him. And I ended up, finding blue-green algae, a whole food source. I worked with psychics. I worked with shamans. I worked with, hypnotherapists, all kinds of people in the alternative realm. And on that journey, I ended up meeting Ariel Ford, who was putting together this collaborative book. One of the things that happened was when my son started coming out of the fog of medication and trauma that he'd been in for several years, he started opening up to psychic abilities and awareness. And he started talking to me about what he was seeing around him and what he was experiencing. And this was when he was 11 and 12. This really started to open up in him. And as his mom, who I'm also very intuitive, and I was aware that all of a sudden I'm seeing the light bulb turn on in this child who had been numb for years. I see the light. I see the life in him. I see his awareness of much more than this world happening, opening up. And one of the things that happened was he ended up seeing an angel of his, a guardian. I would say was a guardian angel. But I also met a woman who communicates with angels myself. And it happened to be at a critical moment in time where I had to make a decision. Do I take my child and do what I felt was best? Or do I continue to go down the model that was keeping him medicated? And Sandie was hard. It was not an easy decision at all to be at that place where, what do I do with my son now? Because what's happening is experimental. At this point, they didn't know what to do to help him. Mm-hmm. And I sought out her help. And I fell into the arms of this woman who I'd never met before. And she held me as I cried and cried and cried. And my angels were right there with me. And she introduced me to my angels. And she said, they're right here, Becki. They're holding you. You know what you need to do. And with that strength and knowing that that guidance was with me, Sandie, I went to the doctors that I needed to go to. And I said, help me get him off of all the medications, and I started seeking other support because I knew he needed help. I didn't just, it was a process, but one that started connecting me to the angelic realm, started connecting me to that. And so when Ariel Ford was putting this book together, I had this beautiful story of angels coming and connecting with me and connecting with my son and supporting us in walking a different path, right? So I was excited to be able to have a book or a story in that beautiful book that she wrote, that she compiled. Yeah.
Book number 7 is Power versus Force, another one that turns up quite often. The Hidden Determinants of Human Behavior by David R. Hawkins.
Oh, this was a wonderful book for me because being empathic my whole life, I didn't necessarily have the framework, Sandie, to understand or to, put a finger on what it was I was experiencing. So when I read this book and he was talking about, kinesiology and the energy behind things and the energy behind words, I got it. Like I knew that was what I had been experiencing most of my life, that I had a sensitivity, as so many of us, to the energy behind things. And so, it came along. I'm not sure in the process where that book particularly came along, but it was definitely a book that I still use today. I still use it today in the work that I do with people and clients. I work with focused life force energy over my office space on my phone. It's all based on that David Hawkins consciousness chart, right? The energies that we experience. And so it's a lovely book to begin to recognize, science is backing what so many of us have, like the mystics have known for, thousands of years. I mean, it's not like it's new information, Sandie, but I think the fun thing is that, science and some of those aspects are starting to kind of come together, right? They're starting to blend.
Finally, science is catching up.
Finally, science is catching up.
Yeah.
So that's a fun book to read, and
it is a powerful book. Yeah, a very powerful book. Mm-hmm. I do know many people who have been influenced by that book.
Yeah.
Okay, so sorry, did you want to say something else about that one?
Well, I think for somebody who's sensitive, it just was a very validating book about maybe why things affect you and impact you the way they do.
Yeah.
So
book 8, we'll move along to the book that you mentioned earlier, Unless It Moves the Human Heart, The Craft and Art of Writing by Roger Rosenblatt. So explain what this phrase, unless it moves the human heart, really means.
I found this book. Jack actually found this book. I knew that I had another book in me, Sandie. I knew there was another book. I'd written a book about my son and the journey of discovery and health and what was happening with him. Like I wrote a little book about that. But I always felt like I had another book to write about the journey of raising a very psychically sensitive child. But that book didn't ever happen because my son, as he grew older, has been hesitant. He is like, Mom, you can't, Mom, don't talk about that. I get it. I honored his process in life. And it's like, okay, I understand. So the book never got written. I think I've got 4 chapters written, Sandie, but it's in my computer. And so I was always, I was kind of questioning, well, do I have another book? And why, I was doing grant writing at the time. I started doing grant writing. I was working for a nonprofit. So I was writing very technical work and I was doing a lot of writing, but it was in a different vein. Jack found this book and he said to me, Becki, you have something more to say. And he said, and this is how I see you. You write from your heart. So when I saw the title, Unless It Moves the Human Heart, I recognized something, Sandie. I recognized that when you energetically connect to another person, when you connect to that heart, that's power, right? If you have something to share that could help another person, there is beautiful power in that. And so, he chronicled, Roger, he just follows his students over a summer. They're taking this class and they're all trying to figure out, well, what do we write about? How do we write? What do we say? And the bottom line for that, for me in that book is, he was saying, if you move the human heart, you have something to say. You have something to write about if it moves another human. And I really resonated with that, Sandie. And so when Jack got sick and passed, I mean, we knew that the book that I was to write was going to be different. I had another book to write, Sandie, but it was a different book than what I thought it was.
Yeah.
But one that also moves the human heart. Mm-hmm.
Very much so. Roger's quote, writing is the cure for the disease of living. I love that. Doing it may sometimes feel like an escape from the world, but at its best moments, it is an act of rescue.
Absolutely has rescued me many times in my life.
Yeah. I'm pleased to see book number 9 on your list, because this is, I read a gazillion books because I'm always interviewing people about their books. And this is one that stood out for me amongst many of the interviews I've done. And a lot of people really love this book, The Afterlife of Billy Fingers, How My Bad Boy Brother Proved to Me There's Life After Death, by Annie Kagan. And this one also came to you at a pivotal moment.
It did. So my beloved Jack passed away in September of 2019. And I was obviously going through horrendous grief, heartbreak, all of what we experience when we lose someone that we're so connected to, with that, that divine love. And I was meditating 3 weeks after he passed, and he came to me very clearly, very, it was very real. I felt it in my body. I mean, I had a body response, I had awareness, and yet that part of me was like, I'm not sure. Am I making this up? Is it just because I want to connect with him? I started having these doubts, and a friend of mine knew about this book, and she said, I think you need to read this book. So I got it, and I loved it. I loved it because I was starting to have my own experiences of connection with Jack in his afterlife. And I read that book and I just was like, this is what I'm experiencing. This is some of what I'm experiencing. The doubt that she went through, right? Thinking that, well, geez, am I like crazy? Am I losing it? And then the things that he would do to validate for her that it was actually him, and the experiences she had. And then the information he was sharing was so akin to what I was feeling and experiencing with Jack and what Jack was saying. So if there was ever a book that was perfect timing for me, this was it, because it validated for me that what I was experiencing with Afterlife Connection with Jack was actually valid, was very valid. It was real, and I could trust it. I could learn to trust it. And then that led me into my own writing. Are you there, Sandie? I think we're waiting for Sandie. There was a computer crash.
There was a computer crash.
There you are.
Nowhere. My computer crashed. Yeah. It had to reboot itself. I'm so sorry.
It's okay. I was just, all of a sudden, we're frozen.
Yeah, I am getting very angry with Mac lately. Their computers are not being as reliable as they should be. Did you manage to finish what you were saying about the afterlife of Billy Fingers?
I believe so. Yeah, I believe so. It was just such perfect timing again, Sandie, for me to read that book with what I was experiencing in my own life. Yeah.
Good. Okay, so let's talk about book number 10, which is your own book. And we're going to kind of do a little bit of time jumping, because you've just been talking about after Jack passed. But this book chronicles the conscious dying process that Jack wanted. So tell us a little bit about the backstory here,
Okay. We, he had not been feeling well, but we thought it was just cold or, something. And it continued to get a little bit worse. So on September 4th of 2019, we were in ER. We went to the ER, and the news was not good. They came back that he had lung cancer that had metastasized into numerous organs in his body. And it was a decision point. He knew he wasn't going to do anything in the traditional way. He looked at me and he said, "I'm going home. You with me?" And I said, "Absolutely, 100%. I'm with you." So we went home and started navigating what this meant for us, Sandie. And at first we didn't know if it was going to be a miraculous healing, because we know that happens. It happens. We didn't know for the first few days if it was going to be one of those or if it was going to be him leaving. But we started to do what we needed to do. I spent every moment with him. He was home. And we started to do things that made his life more comfortable, resonated with his soul. We started doing activities. I was doing a lot of healing work with him. We were sharing as much as we could with each other. And then 10 days into that process, he came to me and said, "This is not about me surviving this. This is about me leaving. And I would really like it if you could help me." And in that moment of complete heartbreak, I found something within me that said, yes, I will help you, whatever that means. So for the next 10 days, we actively participated in things that was helping him release not only his emotional, mental, spiritual self, but the physical body. I think it was only the last 4 days we had hospice available. But we took a journey together, Sandie, that most people, you don't want to take. You don't want to take. And yet we did it beautifully, and we did it intuitively. And we worked in ways with him to release emotional trauma so that he could transition in a good way. We worked with traumas about his childhood. We worked with crystals and stones. We did meditation. We did all kinds of activities to support him leaving. And I had a couple of weak moments. I did. I had a moment where we were standing outside and he was showing me everything that I needed to know about our truck. He was showing me where everything was. And Becki, you need to do this. And I think this is the first thing you need to sell. And so we were going through some of the logistics that you have to go through. And I just had a moment of, let's just get in the truck, Jack. Let's just get into the truck and let's go to the Oregon coast one more time. Let's just go. And he looked at me, Sandie, and he said, I can't. I have to leave. And I was like, I know. So, there were moments like that, Sandie, where I just stepped into honoring what he needed despite how hard it was with me. So 20 days, we had 20 days to do that. And he left the planet. I held him. I held him when he took his last breath. I spent several hours with him afterwards. I rubbed his body with oils. It was, and then, but this is the other thing. Being a writer, I was journaling the process during that 20 days. And it started out as a love letter to him. So I was writing down some of the activities that were happening, some of the things that we were doing together. And I was sharing it with him along the way. I was reading to him. And there became a point in time where he wasn't cognizant enough. The last few days when I was reading to him, it wasn't quite registering for him anymore. And I knew then that, but he had said, "This is the book. This is what you're to write, Becki. This is what you will be sharing." At the time, we didn't know that it would be an Afterlife Connection, Sandie. We just thought it was going to be a conscious death process, because it ended up being so beautiful and supported him and myself in the journey. I found myself 6 months later doing the same type of activities with our landlord, who was like a father to us. So he left 6 months later. So I was able to be there in that process for him. It was beautiful. As challenging and as hard as it was beautiful to be there in that conscious process of leaving the planet and saying goodbye in a way that empowered not only Jack, but it empowered me. So then the Afterlife Connection started happening. I ran into the book about Billy Fingers. And then I'm like, okay, this is the book. This is the second half of the story. The second half of the story is what Jack is actually really excited about. That's the journey. He said, Becki, this is the journey that we spent 12 years getting prepared for.
And you said that Jack, after he left, taught you how to communicate with him.
He did. He had me in meditation. He had me go to a place of feeling and awareness. And so he brought me into a meditation. He had me feel the energy of my body. I could feel a cool energy on my right side. So when he first started coming to me, I would feel it. I'd literally physically feel his presence as a little bit of a cool feeling on the one side. And then as he started coming to me in meditation, he started talking to me about how to breathe into his awareness, his essence. Becki, breathe into me. Breathe me into you. And so he worked with me to hone my skill of being able to connect with him. He said, in this place, when you go to this place, Becki, when you are able to raise your frequency with what we're doing together, this is the place we meet. And it's easier for him then to really communicate with me when I allow that space. So yes, he very much taught me. He very much works with me with other people when I'm working with other people. He was helping me with a woman who had lost her daughter. And he brought her daughter in to session. And he then subsequently was teaching her how to connect with her daughter. And she began then a level of connection with her daughter as well. So the journey, Sandie, continues. And the book that I was to write was that book.
And it's earned its place on this list. I mean, every author knows that every book they write changes them in some way. This whole book club is about the books that really were transformational for you, and writing this book and going through that experience was the epitome of transformation.
Yes.
I would say. Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah. Jack's still working with you?
Yes. Yeah.
Yeah.
He's still very much present in, if I do classes at our space, like we had business together before he passed. He had a recording studio and he was teaching and he was a guitar musician, and so I have classes here now. It's changed how the business started out, but I have classes here. And so he's very present. A lot of people feel him. He ends up showing himself to people. And he's very present when I work in session with people, especially if I'm kind of tuning into that intuitive aspect of if someone wants to come through for someone, a loved one wants to come in, he's actually helping kind of guide the process for me. So very much still present in my work. I still channel right with him. He still has things he's sharing with me. I will say it's not as strong and often because I'm actually going forward in my life, in ways. And so I think, he wants me to go forward in life and grow. But the connection, I don't believe the connection will ever be lost. I mean, it feels like it's a part of the contract that we came to do and the work that we are here to share. So,
yeah.
Yeah.
So there's another piece to this story. Excuse me. After Jack passed,
Mm-hmm.
you then found that you had cancer.
Yeah.
But you chose also to not go the traditional route with
Right.
chemotherapy or any treatment. And you've been treating your body naturally. Tell us a little bit about that.
So I did a little bit of a combination, Sandie, with that. So 20 months after Jack passed, I'm talking to my doctor about a lump that I had found on my breast, my left side. And the news had come back that it was stage 3 cancer. I had a stage 3 cancer lump. It was large enough that they didn't want to just take it. They actually wanted me to do chemotherapy before they did surgery. And I was like, no, I'm not going to go that route. Can we do surgery? Can we remove the lump without doing chemo? And they were a little reluctant, Sandie, but they also honored that process. So I had a month to work on my body, work on my spirit, work on what was behind the tumor energetically. And so I did a lot of I did emotion code. I did Reiki healing. I did all kinds of other alternative healing, body talk, AcuNet. These are all types of alternative healing available. And the energy behind the tumor, Sandie, was, first of all, shock. Shock came up first. And the practitioner said, you know what that is. Absolutely. Absolutely. That was being in our ER, sitting in that room and coming back that Jack was.
Excuse me.
You good?
I've had a really bad cold, and I thought the coughing stage.
Speaking of water, yes. Mm-hmm. A good moment for a water break. Yeah.
So please continue.
Yes. And so, so the shock of that moment, and then grief was right in there behind it. And what I recognized was that our bodies are amazing, Sandie, and that they hold and carry things for us sometimes that we can't process, that maybe we're not ready to process, that we have so much that maybe it feels like we can't make it if we feel everything that we're feeling. And so my body held on to some energy from me. It held on to some grief. It held on to the shock and the grief and the frustration of not being able to change the outcome.
Yeah.
And so I worked with the cancer cells. I worked with the tumor. I actually channel wrote with the cancer cells. I asked the cancer cells what they had to show me, what they had to share with me. And so I did alternative healing for a good month before I went into surgery. And I actually shrank the tumor a whole bunch. Like, the doctor was shocked. He was shocked because the tumor had shrunk. They did surgery to remove the tumor. And then, of course, they wanted to follow up with chemo and radiation. And I just chose not to. Part of it, Sam, I think, was I had to recognize that I had to make the choice to stay. Part of me getting cancer after Jack left was that questioning, truthfully. And I would never have admitted that to myself. It's not like I consciously want to leave the planet, but the part of me that missed him, the part of me that was in grief, the part of me that was like, how am I ever going to move forward in life, right? Without you. That part of me questioned, right? Yeah. That part of me was like, I would just like to join you. I would just like to join you. And yet the reality was, no, I can't. It's not my path. But I had to actually very consciously choose, Sandie. I sat in front of his picture right here. I stood in front of that picture and I said, okay, I'm making the decision, mind, body, and soul, to stay on this planet and to do the work that I'm here to do, to share what I'm here to share, to be the soul that I'm here on this planet to be. I'm choosing to stay. And from that point forward then, Sandie, I knew that my task was to find ways to heal, and that my body had the ability. Like, I knew once I'd clearly made that choice, I knew that, okay, Becki, you got this. Let's make this happen. Let's make this happen. So after surgery, I was doing all kinds of alternative healing. I've worked with naturopathic doctors, and 9 months after stage 3 cancer, I was cancer free. And but this is the thing, I'm continuing to do those things to support my body, to support my health and wellness, to support my soul and spirit, and the growth that I'm here to do. And I have another book to write. So I'm in the process of, writing another book. And so part of that process for me was enough self-love to recognize that I have to take care of me. So I'll share something that just happened recently. I just had a woman who saw my interview with Lee Harris. She contacted me synchronistically. It lined up for me to work with her the other day. 10 days prior, her husband had passed. They had done conscious death together. She said she started reading my story. She said, Becki, it was like I was reading my own story, what you shared. And I was able to talk to her about what happened afterwards, like in the time afterwards, and then my journey with health and what I discovered about the cancer and what it was doing for me, right? What it held for me. But I was able to encourage her to really step into self-awareness and self-love with her body. I don't think we really recognize how powerful our experiences can be on us physically. And yet, I'm here to tell you, yes, the body is an amazing tool. It does an amazing job of supporting us and holding things for us when we can't, when we're not able to, for whatever reason. So one of the gifts that she said was, she says, Becki, thank you for the gift of awareness about self-care and self-love through this loss.
I'm sure that you've had a lot of feedback from people. I mean, what you went through, anyone who's lost someone, dear to them, will understand that experience. Yes. Yours also had many other elements that other people don't necessarily have in their story. Mm-hmm. But the way that you have moved through it, and the way that you've written the book, because it's interesting the way you've constructed it.
Okay.
It's quite original in my experience, because not only are you, telling us, chronicling the journey that you're going through, but then you're also giving us how you was thinking and feeling about that as a kind of, juxtaposition, so that we know what's happening with Jack, we know, but then it's, how is this impacting you on another level? Yes. And that is a really important piece to add. Because too often when we are helping loved ones pass, and I hope people will understand what I'm saying here and take it the right way, is that the focus is on the one that's passing and not on the one that is standing by and helping them pass. So I think your story, gives us a very good insight into that.
Thank you. Yeah, thank you, Sandie. It's, I couldn't do it any other way, because I think part of me had to be there, that heart aspect, right? And how do people navigate it? How did I navigate it? It takes a lot of courage and a lot of strength, but you know what? We have it in us. Sandie, I think the thing that I get to share with people is that we don't realize the capacity we have of strength and courage within us until we face moments like that. And yet the human spirit has this amazing ability to rise above and to be there and to do what needs to be done and to love at a level that you never expected. Like, the greatest love, Sandie, I have ever experienced in my life was in saying goodbye and letting him go. right? In letting him go and helping him on the journey to go. It's we have it. We do have it.
Mm-hmm. So tell me about this other book you're writing.
Oh, this other book is all about love. It really, truly, it is all about the aspects of love, the broad spectrum, everything from heartache and heartbreak to self-love through sickness and disease to moving on in love. What does it mean? Can you find love after losing someone like I've lost Jack? And so it's a kind of a discovery. It's another process of what I've gone through of finding what all that means and the capacity that we have within us to go forward. How do we stand in love, Sandie, with all of it, with all the challenges we've been going through in the last, few years? How are we able to hold love and compassion through all of that?
Well, that's the big question, isn't it? Because
Yeah.
we're watching everything. I was
Yeah.
talking to somebody just the other day about how people are feeling right now.
Yeah.
And it's not just that we've been through this tremendous global pandemic. We've lost loved ones.
Yes.
People have lost jobs. People have lost their center. They've lost so much. I think part of what people are feeling, and they don't know they're feeling it, is a deep sense of betrayal.
Yeah.
And it's not that anyone has deliberately set out to betray them.
Right.
It's that, they had hopes and dreams for a future that is not now, clearly not now. We've gone through a tunnel and we're not coming out, to the same place anymore. And so the dreams and, people have got to find a new way to create.
Yeah. Yeah. And how do you go about doing that? How do you navigate that kind of loss in your life, that kind of grief, that kind of betrayal? Losing a loved one like that suddenly can feel very, very much like betrayal. How could you leave, right?
Yeah.
And so the next book is it's definitely an exploration of all of that. Mm-hmm.
Are you interviewing people or is it all on your own research?
So far, it's just been on my own, but I'm totally open. I've got a year. The book will be done by the end of the year. So, Sandie, I am totally open. Right now, I'm allowing flow to take place. Right.
Yeah, I mean, it's a big subject, and it's probably the most important subject one can tackle. And I would, suggest that it is probably the thing that we need the most. Is where do we find our love? How do we keep going?
Yeah. Yeah. Thank you.
Wow, Becki, what a story. I mean, the writing that you have done is nothing like the writing that you thought you might do.
It's not like what I thought I was going to do, but it's what I came to do, Sandie.
Yeah. Well, we've had many people, a number of people who have included their own book in their 10 best list, and I'm happy for them to do that because, as I said, it really does. It's changed them. So it was an important, life-changing book. But I don't think we've ever had one that is, I'm lost for words, really. I mean, your book is a standout. It really is. And I think that, if we want to know how to live, we should read this book. Because in knowing how to die, I think there's also a great big lesson on how to live.
Yes. Yes.
Yeah.
Thank you. Yes, very much so. I am living proof.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, Becki Koon, thank you so much for adding your 10 best spiritual books for the No BS Spiritual Book Club's library of recommendations.
Yeah. Thank you, Sandie.
I'm really pleased to hear the books that have sustained you through life. Yeah. And thank you.
Thank you so much, Sandie. I hope we get to do this again.
Yes, I hope we do.
Okay.
So you can learn more about Becki Koon's book, 20 Days Changed Everything, a love story through conscious death to afterlife, and her work at beckikoon.com, BECKIKOON.com. Just before we leave, as the spiritual book market becomes increasingly crowded, it is becoming more challenging to sort the wheat from the chaff and find the books that are really going to help you move along your own path. And that's why we launched the No BS Spiritual Book Club. If you're looking for recommendations from authors, teachers, speakers, and others who've walked this path before you, check out our free 10 Best Spiritual Books archive, which is a ever-growing archive at the nobsspiritualbookclub.com. And you can also view previous episodes of this series of interviews there as well. And you can add your name to our Save My Space list to get last-minute updates of upcoming episodes. And finally, if you feel that you have a book in you but don't know how to start getting it out of your head and into the hands of the people who need to read it, visit sedgbeer.com. Click on the Work With Me tab and find out how my experience helping others tell their stories might be just what you've been looking for. That brings us to the end of this week's show. I'm Sandie Sedgbeer, and I'll be back at the same time next week with another 10 Best Spiritual Books interview. Till then, it's goodbye from me and goodbye from Becki.
Thank you, everyone. Bye-bye. Thank you.
Bye-bye.